To give us a rundown on the Accelerator Hedera Basecamp, we have the founder and CEO of Outlier Ventures, Jamie Burke. Thanks for coming on today, Jamie.
Hey there, thanks for having me.
Yeah. So to start off, can you tell us a bit about why Outlier Ventures teamed up with the HBAR Foundation to launch Hedera Basecamp?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've been working with protocols specifically on running programs for their ecosystems for the last year. Outlier's been around for much longer than that. And we've always been blockchain agnostic, right? We're much more focused on disseminating the principles of Web3. And as long as the underlying technology that a startup's using doesn't add friction to that, whether it's from a user experience, the economics or scalability, the performance of it, we're supporters of it. That said, clearly there are some projects and protocols that are the most promising. They're kind of catalyzing an ecosystem of entrepreneurs around them. And, therefore we run these programs specifically to help with them. So other programs we've run or are running sometimes in parallel are Polkadot, Polygon, Filecoin IPFS, and now Hedera. And so the reason why we chose Hedera, and this will kind of unravel as we talk about some of the use cases that we want to focus on, is that we believe there is a place for a protocol like Hedera's, who has made certain design decisions that allow for more performance solutions. So we're kind of not maximalists into kind of any direction of how you might want to kind of break down, well, how decentralized is it? And of course, decentralization has a number of vectors that you might want to look at. But as far as we're concerned, there's a place for Hedera. I think the fact that it has such a strong, primarily enterprise foundation of a number of participants there lends itself very well to a number of use cases. The kind of security requirements that those types of organizations and their supply chains have. But actually, and more important than that, I think in the context of the metaverse, having a stack that allows for principles of Web3, this kind of ideas around sovereignty of the individual, their data, transferability and digital property rights, allows for all of those characteristics, but at the same time allows people to deploy, fully immersive XR experiences that can be as performant as Web2 equivalents, is of critical importance, because we're at this inflection point, right, where the world now is realizing almost every large enterprise on the planet, especially if it's enterprise facing, consumer facing, has to have a metaverse strategy. I'm speaking with people at Facebook Meta, every other week. And there's a number of different pathways that the metaverse can take. One, which is basically an extension of how the web looks like today, where platforms and their shareholders kind of operate at a level that is practically anti-social, certainly not in the interests of the users, versus this more open one. And so my concern is that, yes, it's great that we have incredibly decentralized networks, and important, by the way. But at the same time, large enterprise gaming companies like Ubisoft, which of course recently joined the HBAR Foundation, they need now, if they want to deploy solutions to their consumers, billions of users, they need solutions that scale like today, tomorrow. And if they can't get that, they're going to continue to build in the same way that they've always built, or worse, they'll end up floating into the orbit of players like Facebook. And so I believe it's important that there is an alternative on the Web3 spectrum for large enterprise to be able to deploy today in a really performant and immersive form of the metaverse.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. So what's your overall vision for the Basecamp?
Yeah, so as I said, when we run a program, we'll bias towards the strengths of that particular protocol, technology stack, and ecosystem. And so, of course, as I was saying, two ways to look at Hedera and the HBAR Foundation. So on the one hand, it's made design choices that allow for a more performant blockchain effectively. And so there are a number of use cases that we think lend itself to that type of technology stack. And then on the other hand, there is this ecosystem that's already catalyzed and mobilized around HBAR, formally joined the HBAR Foundation, and that can partner and accelerate startups that are building on top of it. And so that allows us to cover a spectrum of different use cases. If we kind of go to the metaverse one first, because that's kind of the one I was teeing up around this concept of the open metaverse. So, if you are looking to deploy a game, a blockchain-based game that is experienced like a AAA game, that can handle, thousands of players to play simultaneously while still functioning primarily on-chain, then today that requires something like Hedera, right? And so, we're looking at play-to-earn games, blockchain-based games that are really based on kind of performance experience. We're also looking at whether it's virtual worlds or kind of metaverse commerce experiences like shopping. If you're a luxury brand and you want to be able to have people buy digital wearables that are NFTs effectively, you want that shopping experience, that retail experience to be, again, as seamless and performant as possible. You want the items to be displayed in as best resolution as possible. You don't want to compromise on any of those things. And so many of the virtual worlds that we see built on, say, Ethereum, have to compromise significantly on that experience. It doesn't mean they don't have a place. I think they're very important.
Sure.
But at the same time, if I don't want to name any particular names, but if you're, like a very high-end luxury brand, you want the best possible experience. You don't have to compromise on digital wearables any more than you do on the kind of quality of craftsmanship in the physical one. So again, I think these like highly immersive, high resolution shopping experiences or virtual world experiences. So that's kind of the metaverse component. I think, then we're also looking at who can begin to build out equivalent, comparable, and potentially more performant DeFi solutions on Hedera. So that could be equivalents around lending, liquidity, staking protocols that we see on Ethereum, but just within the Hedera ecosystem. Presumably also then leveraging on the performance. And, we've started to see some of these things happen on Solana. And so, we expect to see the same happening on Hedera. And of course, that lends itself from a kind of network security perspective, lends itself well to Hedera because there are a number of large financial institutions that, again, have joined the HBAR Foundation because of the design decisions that will allow for a kind of more institutional grade DeFi experience and potentially, more performant to be able to handle the requirements of billions of dollars of transactions in any kind of given moment. And so, again, we think that's kind of really, really important. An important thing for us and Hedera is kind of ESG and kind of carbon markets, looking at solutions that can allow for green energy markets and these kind of things. And that also then feeds into what I would say is almost an industry 4.0 category, right? So again, you look at a lot of the HBAR Foundation members, large enterprise, complex supply chain, they're looking at how they can deploy blockchain in the context of, say, machine to machine. So how can you have highly performant solutions that allow for hundreds of thousands, millions of low value transactions to happen at scale in an environment that large enterprise feel comfortable is secured. They know who's securing that network. And then, of course, that then feeds back into what I was just saying around regulated financial institutions. Many of those entities, because they're regulated, they're going to have to be able to prove, or at least understand and be able to articulate how the infrastructure that's going to handle their throughput is governed and managed to regulators, to give them comfort that as they put more economic payload on top of these things, it's going to be able to hold up. And so everything from fintech, kind of classic TradFi, whether we're looking at CBDC, stable coins, kind of institutional financial use cases, all these kind of enterprise industrial use cases.
Yeah, absolutely. And you brought up Solana, and of course, there's room for everybody. But one of the differentiators is that security with Hedera. Having that Byzantine fault tolerance. So I was going to ask you about what use cases you're most excited about, but you kind of already covered that. So you mentioned interactions with Facebook, and of course, there's all kinds of other enterprises out there working with Hedera, Ubisoft, all that kind of stuff. So can you tell us what some of your interactions with those enterprises, including Facebook, look like?
Yeah, well, I mean, so there's a couple of aspects to it, right? I think right now, whether you're Epic Games or your Facebook or Meta, as they now like to be called, or Google, right, who I know are a HBAR Foundation member, you're thinking through your metaverse strategy. You're thinking through, what do NFTs mean to you as an organization? You're thinking through how do you want to roll out that infrastructure that's going to support it in terms of a blockchain? Do you try and build your own, like Facebook did? Do you try and launch your own currency, your own stable coins, like Facebook did? And by the way, they failed with Libra.
Pretty spectacularly.
Yeah, because they just wouldn't be allowed to do that as a single entity, right? There's just no way. And so that's why they are now beginning to have to look at, okay, do we take a federated approach? Do we kind of just get together with a load of other large enterprise? And if so, like, how might we configure that? Who controls it? Who's allowed to participate in it? Who's not? And so I think clearly Hedera is going to be one of those choices that they're going to be looked at. Again, it's like no surprise Google's in, it's no surprise Ubisoft's in. And I know some of the kind of maxis out there will immediately dismiss it because of that. Well, it's Google chain or whatever. The reality is, I would rather be bringing these enterprise players into a space which we know is based upon Web3 principles, but that doesn't force them to compromise too much on current operations, on user experience, and all these things. So, Facebook's in this interesting point, right? It's tried to do its own blockchain. It's tried to do its own currency. It's failed. It's now very much orienting as a metaverse company. It's looking at NFTs. They have their own. They also have an NFT blockchain stack in development that they're looking to deploy. Is that going to be an island? Is it going to be interoperable with other networks? And if so, which ones? You look at Tim Sweeney at Epic Games, totally understands the difference between an open metaverse and a closed metaverse, totally understands the power of NFTs, has already articulated that he sees NFTs in a more permissioned context. Again, doesn't matter whether you like that or hate that. Like, Epic's Epic, it's got billions of users, and it's going to make decisions based upon its requirements. And so, I think it more likely in the short to midterm anyway, that somebody like Epic would be looking to something like Hedera than it would necessarily with something like Ethereum. And again, you can debate whether that's the right thing or the wrong thing. It doesn't matter. Like, there are executives sat at Epic and they're making decisions based upon the criteria that's important to them, and what they believe is in their users' interest. And so I think Hedera is a great alternative for those executives that are thinking through those decisions. Equally, if you look at all those organizations that I mentioned, they also have massive partner networks, partners that work with them through their APIs today, and that would like to continue to work with them as they transition into the metaverse.
Yeah.
And so, they also have this the same or similar requirements to their partners that they work with. And so again, I think they would be looking towards, so whether you're somebody that is already working with Google or wants to work with Google, well, you're probably going to have to figure out Hedera.
Yeah.
And so one of the exciting things about running this program is that, and this is true for all programs that we run, right? We activate both the Outlier network and the partners network.
Mm-hmm.
But the great thing about Hedera is it comes with, I don't know how many partners it is now. Is it like 15 or 15 plus?
It's getting close to 30.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow, there you go. So, over 30 enterprise partners in all regions of the world, crossing multiple different sectors. And, if it's a great way to enter the program if you want to work with any of those, right? So, and of course, the great thing about Hedera, again, is it's working on interoperability, right? So it's not like you would only have to build on Hedera. You could be building on something else, you could be building on Ethereum, and you could still bridge into Hedera and work with these enterprise partners. Sure. So it's not necessarily an either or. It's just like, if you want to play in the enterprise space, if you want to play in the fintech and regulated environments space, if you want to execute in a fully immersive metaverse experience today, this is a great solution, maybe in combination with some other blockchains that you might be looking to build on.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And those are some great selling points. So, Jamie, I hope we can get you back when you decide which startups you want to accelerate. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we let you go?
No, I'd just say, look, two things. Firstly, when people hear accelerator, there's certain kind of connotations associated. People think that they are just going to be taught how to be a founder. And that's partially true. Like, if you're a first-time founder, it's a great place to come into. We'll help develop you as a founder, as a group of co-founders, as much as a startup. But at the same time, we've worked with serial founders, right, who don't need to be taught how to be a founder, don't even necessarily need to be taught how to fundraise, but that are having to think through all the complexities of being a Web3 startup, which is new to everybody, right? Yeah. And an order of magnitude more complex. You've got the regulatory component, you've got token design, you've got IP, you've got governance, you've got the tech stack and your interoperability with the chains. There's just a lot of very specialist, fast-moving domains that you need to figure out. And outside of a program like this, you've got to figure out yourself, or hire a very, from a very scarce pool of talent, those people to come and join your organization. And so, really the way I think of it is, you're joining as a Web3 founder, right? And we help you be the best possible Web3 founder you can be in an accelerated period of time. And time in startup world is money. And it's also your life cycle, right? Most projects run out of money, and when they run out of money, they run out of time. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that we've worked with every possible type of founder, from solo founder. It's rare. We normally require you to be a technical founder. If you're a solo founder, we prefer co-founders, so commercial and technical. But we've also done spin-outs from like Boeing, Daimler, where executives in that organization, either from a particular business function or an innovation team, have developed internally some IP. And for whatever reason, they know that for it to succeed, it can't happen within that organization. And so we've helped them spin that into an entirely new entity, structure it appropriately, make sure the founders are well incentivized, hire. We've even run RFPs, requests for proposals, for spin-outs who've had no team, to find entrepreneurs to come in, and then kind of Web3ify them. And so we've done an decentralized air traffic control system from Boeing. We've done an open mobility system from Daimler. So it could very well be that you are a kind of executive sat within an organization that's looking to jump out and just do your own thing. Or it could be that you are an innovation lead within an enterprise team and you want to spin out a startup. So we can help across that entire spectrum. Some projects join the accelerator entirely financed. So they're actually not in there to raise money. They're in there to build Web3 community. They're there to kind of think through how they might design for and launch a token. So don't think of it as like a classic accelerator where we're kind of teaching you to suck eggs. Mm-hmm. This is literally, if you're going to be a Web3 startup and you want to enter any of the use cases that I just mentioned earlier, then us in combination with the HBAR Foundation can make that happen.
All right. Well, calling all startups, right? And I know the support that Outlier and the Hedera, the HBAR Foundation can supply will be invaluable. So, Jamie, thanks again for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on.